All right, hi everybody. Welcome to this YouTube video, which I have created to act as your ClassLive number 2. And the reason I'm doing this as a YouTube video is it's kind of an experiment. Typically during this session, I basically just go over the 2 critical thinking papers that you're going to write before the end of the semester. And I get a few questions from people here and there, but some people, they just want to view the requirements for the papers, and sometimes they want to be able to go back and look at their requirements again. And so I thought I would make a YouTube video that you can take notes on, email me the notes, get your credit for the ClassLive, but then you can also go back to the video if you need to. In addition, I plan to email this PowerPoint presentation to you so that you can just scroll through it or print it out if you want to see the requirements for these 2 papers that you have to write. Okay, so that is why I'm doing this on YouTube. I'm just trying something new, and I want to see how it works out, and I would like to get your feedback. If you have questions about the content of this video, please email them to me and I will answer them. Okay? Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. In this semester, and due at the end of the semester, you will have to write 2 one-page critical thinking papers. And those papers have to be single-spaced, but I'll go through all those requirements in just a little bit, okay? But let me remind you right now that you need to start taking notes on this session so that you can email them to me, okay? So the 2 critical thinking papers, you're going to write 2 papers, and we're going to go over both of the papers one at a time. So let's go to the paper number 1. All right, critical thinking paper number 1. The first paper that you're going to write. Okay, now you do not have to write them in this order. This is just the titles that I've given them. Okay, and this is macroeconomics. So let's go ahead and talk about the first paper that you're going to write. Okay, about assignment. This assignment is an assessment of the following performance standard. So if you go into the list of performance standards, you'll see standard 2H. Students will create a plan making recommendation for stimulating economic growth in an economy. Okay, so you're going to write a one-page plan giving recommendations on how you can stimulate, or how an economy can stimulate economic growth. All right, what should you write, or what should I write? Your goal for this critical thinking paper is to respond to the following essential question. What can be done in the global economy to stimulate worldwide economic growth? Now, to respond to this question, you're going to create a one-page plan making 3 specific recommendations for stimulating economic growth globally. Now let me explain what I mean by the word specific. Let's say, this is just an example, let's talk about lunch. Somebody says, hey, what do you want to have for lunch? You could say, I want to have food. Now that is not a very specific answer. Lunch implies food. So telling the person that you want to eat food for lunch is a terrible way of responding to that question. Alternatively, you could say a hamburger. Now that's a little more specific. Honestly, if I'm going to go get your lunch, telling me that you want a hamburger is not specific enough. Telling me that you want a half-pound hamburger with 2 slices of American cheese, lettuce, tomato, grilled onions, grilled mushrooms, with mayonnaise on a toasted Kaiser roll with a side of French fries, specifically shoestring French fries, and a 32-ounce Diet Coke. That is a specific answer to the question, what do you want to have for lunch? Okay? Now, so I want you to understand, in this paper, I don't want you to tell me, when I ask you what you can do to stimulate economic growth, you can't just say something simple like, well, you should do things that stimulate economic growth. Well, that's like saying I want food for lunch. You also shouldn't say something like, well, just drop the trade barriers internationally. That is like saying I want a hamburger. But saying something like, I think that Japan should change its policy on exports, and this is what the policy says, and this is what I think it should change to. If it changes that policy so that, you know, I don't know, I'm making this up, by the way. You would have to look up the policy yourself. But if you look up a specific export policy and say that that country should change that policy, that is very specific. And then you would need to tell me how it would affect economic growth. Okay? I want specific. I promise you that if you do not give me specific recommendations, you will probably get a 4 or a 5 out of 10. Okay? The average score on my papers, typically, I don't know, I haven't done the actual math. I haven't punched it in, but I know I give lots and lots of 5s. And I give lots and lots of 4s. I give lots and lots of 6s. Why? Because lots of people do not listen to the requirements that I give them, and they do not give me specific recommendations for stimulating economic growth. So please be very careful. Make sure that your recommendation is not some general thing like saying, I want food for lunch. Okay? I need specific details on what it is that you think should happen to stimulate economic growth. Okay? So that's what it is that you're going to write. Okay. So to help you, let's move on here. What should I include in the paper? Well, in the lessons about economic growth, I explain that economic growth is an increase in the production quantity of goods and services in an economy. Okay, so this is what you're focusing on. You're focusing on the idea of production increasing. Not an increase in dollars spent necessarily, but an increase in productive quantity of goods and services. Okay? Here's how you're going to start your paper. You're going to start your paper with the following statement. I, comma, and then you're going to write your name. I would write Professor Ryan, comma, make the following 3 specific recommendations for increasing the quantity of goods and services produced globally. Okay? You're going to start with that statement. By the way, you are not going to put your name at the top of the paper. Your name is going to be in this sentence. So you don't have to put your name at the top of the paper. You're not going to put a date on the paper. You're not going to put the name of the class. I don't want anything at the top of the paper. Nothing at the top of the paper. I want your paper to start with this statement, and your name is going to be in there. That's how I'm going to know that it's your paper. Okay? After you've made that statement, then you're going to write 3 paragraphs, each paragraph giving a specific recommendation for increasing the productive output of goods and services throughout the world. Overall, this will be 3 recommendations. That's 1 recommendation per paragraph. You must include the specifics of the plan for each recommendation, including the actions that will be taken by governments to implement the plan. Okay? Now let's go look at it. We're going to go 1 more page here. Okay? If you want to, you can use the document template that's titled CT Paper 1 Template, which can be found in the Doc Sharing tab. So on the top of, in the eCollege Classroom, if you go to Doc Sharing, you'll see this page, and you'll see this, CT Paper 1 Template.docx. If you click on that, it's going to open up a Word document that is already formatted. So you don't have to make any changes to the formatting. You can just highlight things and start typing in. And this is what it's going to look like. It looks just like this. Okay, this is what you'll see in the Word document. It says I, comma, put your name in here. So you'll highlight this and then type your name in so that this goes away and all I see is your name. So for me, it would say, I, Professor Ryan, make the following 3 specific recommendations for increasing the quantity of goods and services produced globally. Then, under this 1 here, I'll highlight this and I'll do my first recommendation. Meaning I want to delete these words and write over top of it. What am I going to write? Well, what I want you to write is, write about your first recommendation to increase production output of goods and services in the world. And you'll get 1 point for giving me 1 specific recommendation. Then you'll get your second point. You must be specific about the actions of the governments. For example, the Japanese government has to vote and change this policy. So you have to tell us what the government is going to have to do to make the change so that they know the action they can take to increase economic output. Okay? And it could be the government that's making a change, agencies within the government, or other organizations that are involved in any policy changes. You will get your second point when you tell me specifically the actions that are being taken for your recommendation to be implemented. Your third point that you'll get, you must explain the connection between the actions of these parties and the increase in productive output. Meaning you have to explain to me how their actions are going to make the economy, the economic output, go up. Talk about the mechanisms that we are learning about in this class. Talk about the mechanisms of aggregate supply and aggregate demand. Talk about the mechanisms of the real GDP, okay, and natural real GDP. Talk about, explain briefly how the actions of the government are going to cause an increase in productive output. Okay? So that's your first one. Then, under number 2, you're going to do that whole thing again, only with your second recommendation. And then after the second one, you're going to do the third one. And altogether, you'll get 3 points for the first one, 3 points for the second one, 3 points for the third one. That's 9 points. And you'll get another point for doing correct formatting on the paper. Okay? And your formatting will be correct if you use the template that I put under doc sharing. Okay? All right. Now, how long should the paper be? The paper must be at least 1 full single-spaced page. Note that full page means that the text extends all the way to the bottom of the page. That's typically 42 lines to 44 lines at a 12-point font. Basically, you must have 2 lines for the introductory sentence and then an average of no less than 13 lines per recommendation for a total of 41 lines of text in 12-point font. Do you see how specific I am about the requirements? That's how specific I want you to be about your recommendations. Okay? All right, moving on here. Formatting. The document must be letter size, that's 8.5 by 11, and the text must be single-spaced, not 1.15 spaced. You need to understand that Microsoft Word has a default of 1.15 spaces. Change it. It must be single-spaced. And if you're not sure how to do that, Google, how do I make my Word document single-spaced? And I'm sure you'll find instructions on the internet on how to do that. The page margin should be 1 inch on all 4 sides. Okay? And please note that certain versions of Microsoft Word prior to 2007 set the left and right margins at 1 1/4 inch, so you have to change that. The font size for the whole paper must be somewhere between 10 and 12 point. 12 point preferred. If your paper winds up being longer, you can make it 10 point or 11 point or 11.5 point or whatnot. The font must be, there are no arguments about this, the font must be the Times New Roman font. I do not want the Calibri. The default on Microsoft Word is Calibri. Change it to Times New Roman. Include 1 blank space between each of the recommendation paragraphs. In fact, if I go back here, you'll see, look, there's a space here. That's okay. There's a space here. That's okay. There's a space here. That's okay. Those are the only spaces that are acceptable. All right, let's see here. You will be graded on spelling and proper use of grammar. Okay, so let's look at that even more specifically, or let's see how you're going to get scored on this paper. All right, oops, excuse me, I'm sorry. When and where is it due? When? You must submit this assignment by 11:59 p.m. on July 6th, not July 7th. July 6th. By 11:59 p.m. on July 6, 2014. That's a Sunday. That is technically the last day of this class. Where are you going to submit this paper? You must submit this assignment to the correct eCollege Dropbox by the deadline stated above. Assignments that are sent by email, doc sharing, or any other method will not be considered as submitted. You have to submit it by the Dropbox. If you do not submit it by the Dropbox, it will not be considered to have been submitted. Now, if you have problems with the Dropbox, text me, send me an email, call the help desk, the eCollege help desk. Don't wait until the last minute. If you submit it on Friday and have problems, try it again Saturday morning. If you're still having problems, try again Saturday afternoon, okay? I recommend submitting it by Wednesday or Thursday, so that if you have problems, you can deal with you have enough time to deal with the problem. Okay. All right. Let's talk about how I'm going to score this particular paper. Okay. You will be given points according to the following requirements for a total of 10 points. You will get 1 point for proper formatting. And when I say proper formatting, I'm talking about this, formatting. These 6 things here, you're going to get 1 point, well, really 1 through 5. You're going to get 1 point for getting all 1 through 5 correct. Okay? You'll get 3 points per recommendation as follows. You'll get 1 point for each description of a recommendation to increase productive output of goods and services in the world. That's 1 point per recommendation, and it has to be a specific recommendation. You'll get 1 point per recommendation, okay? You must be for being specific about the actions of the government's agencies and organizations involved. And then you will get 1 point per recommendation for explaining the connection between the actions of the parties and the increase in productive output, okay? That's 10 points. Now we're going to go over. Now we're going to talk about the things where you can lose points. You will be given points. Okay, so here we go. Oh, additionally, here we go. Points will be deducted for the following errors and deficiencies. You will lose 1 point for each misspelled word. So if you spell 10 words incorrectly, you're going to have a 0 for the paper. You will lose 1 point for each line of text fewer than 41 lines. So if you submit a paper that's only 39 pages or 39 lines long, you will lose 2 points. And you will lose 1 point. Now this is important. Please listen to this. Every time you explain something that is already explained in the lessons. The purpose of the paper is not for you to reiterate general macroeconomic knowledge. Now, this does not count. I'm not saying that, you know how I told you in the paper you have to explain the connection between the policy and the increase in economic output? Obviously, you're going to have to use macroeconomic knowledge to explain that. What I have found is that some students in their paper, so that they can fill up space and make it look like it's a page long, they'll explain aggregate demand, they'll explain aggregate supply, they'll explain socialism or capitalism and all kinds of other interesting things. I don't want you to explain those things to me. Give me the recommendations, tell me how they're going to implement the recommendation, and tell me what you think the effect of the recommendation is going to be. That's all I want. Okay? Anything additional that you give me, I'm going to deduct a point every time you try to explain something new or not something that's from the lessons. Okay? Don't, put a whole bunch of fluff in this paper just to fill it up. I can tell the difference between good content and fluff. If you are putting in filler to make your paper longer, I promise you I will notice. Okay. All right. I think, let's see if that's it for this for paper number 1. Yep, that's it. Okay, so that's it for paper number 1. If you have any questions about paper number 1, send me an email, send me a text. I'd prefer it in email. If you want to send me a text saying, hey, Professor Ryan, I sent you an email asking about the paper. Can you get back to me as soon as possible? Okay. Okay, that's paper number 1. Paper number 2. Okay, some of the things about paper number 2 are the same as paper number 1. Some of them are different, so please pay attention. Let's go over critical thinking paper number 2. Now, about the assignment. This assignment is an assessment of the following performance standard from macroeconomics. Standard 3J. Students will describe and explain the controversies related to debt and articulate these issues through the worldview of Christian theism. This assignment addresses the following essential questions. Now, there's 2 of these questions, okay, and it's very important that you answer both of them. What is a biblically supported reason why it is okay for the United States to carry a national debt? Number 2, what is a biblically supported reason why the United States should not carry a national debt? Now, you will find that, especially among Christians, there are very, very hard opinions on this. I mean, people are very committed to their opinions on these things. I know lots of Christians that would say that it's never okay. National debt is terrible, okay? And I have had students in their paper have said, I couldn't find any biblically supported reason why the United States should carry a national debt. For the students, now that has happened in the past, like 5 years. That has happened about 4 or 5 times where a student has just outright said there's no biblical reason for national debt. Every single one of those students lost half of their points on the paper because they only wrote half of a paper. If you decide to skip half the paper, you will lose half the points. Also, if it's not a full page, you'll get a 0. So, it is important that you answer both of these questions. I do not care whether you agree with these statements. I don't care whether you agree with these questions. The purpose of this paper is to stretch your brain, to get you to think about the other side of the argument. You have to think about the other side of the argument. You have to do that your whole life. So this paper is a good opportunity for you to make an argument for something that you may not believe in, but you still have to make the argument, even if you don't agree. Okay? All right, so let's see what we're going to do here. What should I write? Write a one-page paper presenting a biblical approach to both sides of the national debt in the United States. In the first paragraph, now this first paragraph, I want to warn you that lots of students really mess up this first paragraph. It's a very simple first paragraph. You don't have to do very much in this first paragraph. It's not going to be half of your paper. It's very brief. It's like 4 or 5 lines in your paper. In the first paragraph, briefly explain what the U.S. national debt is. What is the national debt? Just very briefly, 1 or 2 lines. And to whom the money is owed. Now, do not use your own personal opinion on to whom the money is owed. Research it. Look it up. You do not have to do a reference. I don't care about the reference, but you do have to look it up and figure it out. I believe actually the textbook answers both of these questions, so you could simply look it up in the textbook. Okay? In the second paragraph, explain a scripturally supported argument for why having a national debt in the U.S. is a good thing. I want you to, and this, you're not making stuff up here, you're not making the Bible say what you want it to say, you're simply finding biblical support for why it might be okay to have a national debt in the United States. Okay? In the third paragraph, you're going to do the opposite. You're going to explain a scripturally supported argument for why having a national debt in the U.S. is not a good thing. You're taking 2 sides of the same argument. And when you research 2 sides of the same argument, you become a smarter person. You become better at understanding the way other people think. And that's a good thing. Okay? All right. Let's see here. What should I write? Okay, so that's it. So that's it. That's only 3 paragraphs. 1 paragraph, 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs. So, if you write your paper and it's 4 paragraphs long, it's already wrong. I don't want 4 paragraphs. In fact, some people, they write a concluding paragraph. I don't want you to write a concluding paragraph. No concluding paragraph. You got the first paragraph here, the second paragraph, the third paragraph, and you're done. Okay? All right, let's see here. How long should it be? The paper must be at least 1 full single-spaced page. Note that full page means that the text extends all the way to the bottom of the page, typically 42 to 44 lines at 12-point font. Now listen, please, put this in your notes. You're taking notes right now. Type this in your notes that you email to me. Your first paragraph should be no more than 4 or 5 lines. Not 4 or 5 sentences. 4 or 5 lines. For example, do you see this point right here? This is 1 line, 2 lines, 3 lines, 4 lines. That's 4 lines. That's what I mean. Your first paragraph should be no more than 4 or 5 lines. Okay? All right, let's see here. The second and third paragraphs should each be about 18 to 20 lines. You see what we got here? If one of them's 18 and the other one's 20, that's 38. Add 5 more lines, that's 43. That's a full page. Okay? Okay, let's see. There is no, oh, please listen. I said this once, I'm saying it again now. Please do not write a conclusion. I don't want a conclusion. In fact, if you do write a conclusion, the first thing I'm going to do is highlight it and delete it before I grade your paper. And that's probably going to make your paper less than 1 page long, at which point you're probably going to fail the assignment. Please don't write a conclusion. There is no need for a concluding paragraph. Do not include a concluding paragraph. Okay. All right, sorry, I know I sound really like intense while I give you these instructions. I've been giving this assignment for, like I said, about 5 years, and even though I feel like I'm very specific about these instructions, but even though I'm very specific about these instructions, for 5 years people have been turning in papers that have a concluding paragraph. They're not a full page. They're not Times New Roman font. They're in font size 14. The margins are 1.5 inch on either side. I don't understand why I can give such detail in the instructions and people still turn in papers that do not follow the instructions. Okay, so that's why I sound very intense, trying to express to you that I am very serious about these paper requirements. Okay, all right, let's see here. Formatting. All right, now there's a change in here. I want you to listen very closely to these formatting requirements. They're different. Some of them are different than the first paper. Okay. The document must be letter size, that's 8.5 by 11, and text must be single spaced, not 1.15 spaced, just like in the first paper. Now listen to this. Number 2, and people mess this up. Every year I get people who violate this formatting requirement. Include only your name at the top of the page. No title, no date, nothing but your name. That's all I want to see at the top of the page is your name. Okay? There should be no more than a single space between your name and the first paragraph. Okay? That's number 2. Number 3, the page margin should be 1 inch on all sides. Remember that sometimes the default is more than 1 inch. Make sure that your margins are 1 inch on the top, 1 inch on the bottom, 1 inch on the left, and 1 inch on the right. Okay? The font size for the whole paper must be somewhere between 10 and 12 point. I prefer 12 point. If your paper winds up being longer than a page, go with 11.5 or 11 or 10.5. Okay? To make it a little tiny, make sure it fits on one page. The font must be Times New Roman. I don't like other fonts. I'm a stickler. Times New Roman, you will find that most business professors prefer Times New Roman. Okay, well, the ones, at least back in my day, they did. Okay, but I prefer Times New Roman. Don't give me anything except Times New Roman. Number 6, do not include any spaces between paragraphs. No spaces. This is different than paper number 1. In paper number 1, I told you to include a single space between your recommendations. But in this paper, I don't want any spaces between paragraphs. Okay? If Microsoft Word inserts spaces between the paragraphs, you're going to need to figure out how to remove them. Okay? Number 7, you must indent the first line of every paragraph, just like they taught you probably taught you in high school. Indent the first line of the paragraph. And number 8, you will be graded on spelling and proper use of grammar. Okay? Now I only have one slide left, so we're pretty much just about done, and I was able to pull this off in less than an hour, but let's see what it is. I can't remember what the last slide is. Oh, here we go. Oh, when and where is it due? Of course. Okay, when and where is it due? When is it due? It's due the same day as the other paper. You must submit this assignment by 11:59 p.m. on July 6, 2014. That's when it's due. Where? You must submit this assignment to the correct eCollege Dropbox by the deadline stated above. Assignments that are sent by email, doc sharing, or any other method will not be considered as submitted. You have to submit it to the Dropbox, okay? All right, so what I'm going to do now is, well, not right now. Well, yeah, I'm about to, after I finish this recording, as I'm uploading it, I'm going to send you an email, and I'm going to tell you what the link is, what the YouTube link is for this video. In that email, there's going to be this PowerPoint. I'm going to actually include the PowerPoint file, and you can open it, and you can see all these. You can read along if you want to. You can make notes on it if you want to print it out. You can do that so that you can have a copy of the requirements yourself. But that's all I have. and just send me an email if you have any questions about these paper requirements, okay? You can also email me if you don't have questions. If you found this video useful, send me an email and say, hey, Professor, great video, thanks. If you hated the video, if you thought there was a problem with it, send me an email and say, hey, Professor Ryan, that video really stunk up the internet. Whatever you got to say. Well, try to be nice, but if you want to, anyway. All right, well, I'll talk to you guys later. Good luck on your papers, and have a good day.